we want to thank everybody that comes on board here as we move along. I'm going to take a second. We'll get everybody introduced. But first, let me introduce DebtLink.com. We're the digital directory that is focused on the ARM or receivables management industry, debt industry. And so if you're looking for a service provider, you're trying to meet and greet, it's the hub of our industry. So we've been described as a 24-hour-a-day, 365 trade show, digitally, minus the awkward eye contact stuff. But anyway, so DebtLink.com, we are very pleased to host this webinar. And we're even more pleased to thank our sponsor, Sedric. Sedric is AI, and we are going to, since we have, and Chris von Huene will give us a little bit more details in a second, but we have a series of webinars that are coming up that will all be focusing on AI, so that we're not just doing the mile wide, inch deep approach, but really getting into applications and how it can really be best used. So we're excited about that. So thanks for coming on with us. We're excited to cover some good information. And with that, I'm going to switch over and hand it off to my partner, Chris Runcie. Chris, take it from there.
Thanks, Murph. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Today's webinar, again, is going to focus on how AI is transforming compliance monitoring. And I want to welcome our three experts in this area. First off, Chris von Huene. He's a senior account executive with Sedric AI. Heath Morgan. He is a partner with Martin, Golden, Lyons, Watts, and Morgan. And Kyle Christensen, an advisor at LF Partners. Our format today, we're going to run through a series of slides for you. We're going to give each of the speakers an opportunity to tell you a little bit about themselves, their background, how they got to be in the seat that they're in, and then we're going to jump right into our content. We have a series of questions that we have prepared in advance. At the end of that period, we will open up to Q&A from our audience. Along the way, if you have any questions that you would like to put to an individual, you can enter them in the Q&A box, and Chris Murphy will be monitoring those and distributing them as appropriate. At the tail end, everybody that has registered for the webinar will receive a link to the presentation deck, a link to the recording, and contact information for each of our panelists. All right, with that, I want to jump right into the introductions. So first up, we have Chris von Huene. He's, again, Senior Account Executive at Sedric AI. Chris, tell us a little bit about yourself, your company, and how you got to be in the seat that you're in today.
Yeah, sure. So first off, great to be here and looking forward to this webinar with all these amazing folks. So background by way of finance, ironically. So I did financial planning and analysis for publicly traded companies, then switched over to sales and just got really hooked with account recovery management. Really just enjoy the space. Working with like AI, like Sedric at a high level is a speech analytics platform. So we're helping compliance get that full visibility. We're helping operations to improve that agent training and performance, and doing that at scale without adding more humans to the mix. So high level, that's Sedric in a nutshell. And then, like I said, myself, finance sales background, worked with multiple companies building out the whole go-to-market motion, including partnerships as well. So a little bit about me there too.
That's awesome. Thank you, Chris.
My pleasure.
Next up, Heath, I'm going to ask you to do the same. Tell us a little bit about yourself, your company, and how you got to be in the seat that you're in.
Sure. My name is Heath Morgan. I'm as mentioned, a partner at Martin, Golden, Lyons, Watts, Morgan. I'm essentially a fractional general counsel and compliance attorney. I've been in the industry. I was born in the industry. I'm a third-generation collection attorney. And for the last 6 years, I've been working for the firm and represent agencies, collection law firms, debt buyers, creditors in this space, and have really gotten into AI in the last 3 years. I do a lot of AI consulting on AI policies, AI implementations, AI committees, AI risk assessments. And really it kind of stems from the idea that I'm always looking for tools and methods and process that can help make companies in the industry more sustainable. And when I kind of clued in on AI technology a couple of years ago, I kind of leaned in and haven't stopped. So that's kind of my story.
Awesome. That's awesome. Thank you. And next up, Kyle Christensen. Kyle, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, the company that you're
Hi,
with?
everybody. Kyle Christensen here. First, thanks, Chris and Murph, for hosting this. We appreciate you guys having us. I've been in financial services for my whole career, 25 years, the majority of it in collections. Like a lot of people probably in the call, you don't pick, I'm going to say I'm going to be in collections, but I started that in college, and it just gets in your blood, gets in your DNA, and you want to be part of it forever. Over the last 5 years, I've spent a lot more time in the fintech space. So a lot of my background, much more recently, is from the perspective of supporting fintechs. The company that I work for now, LF Partners or LFP, it partners with a venture capitalist company named QED Investors, and we really do 3 different things. We do executive search or placement, advisory services, which is where I live and breathe. And to Heath's point, I'm spending a lot more time in AI advisory, more specifically recently. And then also we're an incubation shop, incubating new startup companies. I'm here today specifically, just like Heath, I really operate more in that operations plus IT space, and AI is a natural place to go deep into. And over the last several months, especially, we've been wanting to try to figure out the best way to support the industry as all these specific changes in the compliance space happens. So that's why I'm here today, and so I'm excited to talk to the group.
That's awesome. Thank you, Kyle. All right, so just to sort of set the stage here for today's discussion, a few bullet points about how and why AI is going to transform compliance monitoring. I think we all know that the rapid growth in non-traditional communication methods like texting, emailing, chat has brought with it new and far more complex compliance challenges than in the past. And while a lot of legacy tech often enabled agencies to automate some of those processes, mainly in voice communication monitoring, very often those were plagued by high false positive rates and inconsistencies that often required manual intervention. Now, with AI-driven platform like Sedric's available, they extend beyond voice to cover text, chat, email, and thereby allow agencies to more efficiently monitor 100% of their consumer interactions. This coverage not only ensures compliance, but also surfaces actionable insights to inform training and improve operational performance. So if we just jump right into our questions.
Well, before we go, Chris.
Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry. Yes.
I'm gonna launch just a very quick poll, because we want to get an idea. The folks that are here on the, where do they fall in the industry? So as you guys get this, it's jumped out there. Pick who or what you do. And that'll help us just gauge what the topics that we cover based on the audience. So I'm excited. Look at the guy that does these webinars, and I'm watching this when the things start popping. It's exciting. So guys, continue to click through that. We'll let it go for another minute. And then we will, in the meantime, I'm going to get the next page ready to go for question 1 that Chris can launch or get into in just a second. We have, all right, we just got 2 more people who have neglected to respond. I don't want to call anybody out. I'm just kidding. Awesome. All right, guys, thanks so much. Chris, why don't you go ahead, and I'm going to end the poll.
Sure. So I think the first piece, right, like what's the difference between AI today and 1 year ago? I think I was kind of thinking back to it, right? Because like ChatGPT is one of the main AIs that like I use for personal and for work. And if you think about just like the difference of prompting ChatGPT about a year ago, you're propagating and saying, here's your profile, here's who you are, here's where I need you to be, and a lot of kind of layering there, right? The prompt engineer terms came up, and it's a very big thing on how good are your prompts. And we look at it today, and you can be a lot more casual and have a lot more of a natural, progression of a conversation. Meaning, I don't need to say, you need to be someone in compliance, and we need to make sure that we're staying, compliant. You have 20 years of experience, so on and so forth. It's more just, I'm in the arm space. I want to get your take on this from like a compliance perspective. What do you think? And so we're seeing this very, fast evolution of kind of system, like talking at a system. It's like actually like talking to a system. You know, I hear people nowadays like they'll thank the AI when they're like talking with it because it's such a natural language process. So I think a huge shift is not only just how you're working with the system, but its ability to understand context and kind of understand you as a person based on what you've done prior with it or just how you're talking to it in general.
That's perfect. Kyle, anything to add there?
I mean, Chris, that's really, really well said. I really like what you said about the prompt engineering. That's an entirely new, different thing that didn't exist a year ago. When I think about this question, because I was, interestingly enough, as I was going through like an incubation recently, I was working with the IT group saying, what help me understand better why this is all possible when it wasn't 6 months, 12 months, especially 3, 5 years ago. In a simple version is it definitely comes down to generative versus generative AI and compute. It's possible to be able to monitor things at a rate that was not before possible 5 years ago. But generative AI, and I think it's important for people to have a baseline understanding of this. Generative AI, you've got LLMs, the large language models, and the agentic AI. And think of it in terms of 5, 6 years ago, we had machine learning. Machine learning, you had to go tell it what to do, and it was going to predict how good it could get to that answer. So in today's world, you can use LLMs to help understand what exists out there in the world and create new content. That's the reactive part of it. They can constantly monitor what's going on. They can interpret. They can give you your interpretation. That's the prompts that Chris was talking about. What's cool, exciting, and almost a little bit scary is the agentic side of the house, which is now you switch to reactive, give me advice, to agentic, which turns into proactive, take the advice, do something, make a change. And it's those two things together that's creating this flywheel that is so fast, so much more possible than what human beings could do in the past. And today you could accomplish with 10 engineers what 10 engineers today could beat 100 engineers 2 years ago. It's pretty crazy.
That's amazing.
Yeah, and just to add to that, I think obviously the systems are more sophisticated, quicker, faster. And the reason behind that, if we're looking just a year ago or even 2 years or 3 years ago, we've seen just a rapid adoption across the board by consumers, by regulators, by companies. And we're seeing rapid investment and massive levels of investment in companies and technology to continue to create systems and software programs that can do this at a faster rate. And that kind of collective all-in factor was a big part of what's elevating the development cycle and just the technology and the ability to do more things with it. I always say that AI at its core, whether you're talking about generative AI, conversational AI, machine learning, RPA, as Kyle mentioned, there's the different types of AI. But they all, they all depend on massive amounts of data. And they require, our cooperation by giving them and providing that data either individually or as a company. And to date, we've seen, amazing use cases where consumers, companies have found benefits to using that, and they're willing to make that trade-off to share that data. And so I think that's a one component that, as long as, companies have that trust to use that consumer data to make their consumer experience more efficient, we're going to continue to see increased adoption, increased development, increased investment in this technology.
That's great. That's great. Heath, that makes me think this might be a great time, Murph, to launch that other poll we have about where people are in their AI journey. I don't know if you have that ready or can do that now, but I'd be interested to hear from some of our attendees about where they are sort of in the process. We did this at the RMAI Summit last week, and I'd say by and large, most people are in the first category. They're just exploring. But there were a handful of folks who were using it back office and support. And actually, there was one group present that does have a consumer-facing product at this point.
Yeah, it's interesting. So as the poll questions get answered, we're right now at a 50-50 of just exploring and using it as a back office / support.
Yep.
Nobody has responded using it as a consumer-facing interaction yet. So let me see. It continues to.
So while we wait, maybe for those responses to come in, let's jump to the next question here. Chris V, what trends in communication channels are creating the biggest compliance challenges for organizations today in your experience?
Yeah, I think like what we're seeing is, digital is like kind of one bucket, and then like AI bots, utilizing them as that consumer facing as the second. And when I say digital, it's just if we think about a voice call, right, you can do one voice call at a time. I mean, you can use a parallel dialer or a power dialer that's just ringing more phones quickly. You're not having more conversations, so not as big of compliance issue there. But digital, I can take one template of a text and I can send it out to thousands of people at once, right? So when we think about that from a compliance challenge, how are we sure we're staying compliant there? Digital is definitely challenging, just due to speed and scale. You can do things a lot faster and one person can press the button versus having, agents making those phone calls. And the next bucket is around AI bots. It's again, it's utilizing them, but having the guardrails, right? Making sure they know when to stop so they don't do hallucinations, they're not saying incorrect things, and they're doing like a hot transfer, which is passing it off to a live human being when they kind of hit those knowledge thresholds or those parameters or restrictions that are put in place. And really just making sure that those have been thought through, right? Because we've seen ones, I think, some of the airlines, the AI bots just give away like a bunch of free tickets to people, and the airlines had to honor that. It went a little haywire there. So I think compliance-wise, especially in collections, those are the two biggest pieces that I'm seeing companies tackle. And obviously, there's plenty of ways to tackle them, like I mentioned, but that's where I'm seeing the trend is we want to go digital, we want to use like an AI bot, but we also want to make sure we don't, give ourselves any leeway to potentially face more legal issues or more compliance violations.
Yeah, and I'll add to that. I think, if you've heard me talk before, one of my sayings is, in our industry, in the collection industry, we don't give out awards for most innovative company. If you're first to market, you get sued. And we've seen that as evidence, the fact that we've had email technology, text message technology for 15, 20 years, and we're just now getting to a level where maybe over half the industry is using text and email to communicate with consumers. And one of the reasons for that slow adoption rate is there wasn't clear laws, there wasn't clear case law, there wasn't clear guidelines on how to comply. Ever since Regulation F came out, they kind of gave us, more of the approval and guidance on email. There's been case law on text messaging under the TCPA. And so they have established compliance guardrails to follow. The industry is looking for how to comply with this. And, Chris is right that with voice bots and conversational AI, we don't have that. We don't have that guidance. We have a publication from the CFPB from 2 years ago giving some guidance on conversational AI. But as of now, there's no state or federal regulations on how to comply. So if you're moving forward in those communication channels, you're looking at what existing laws we can comply with, TCPA, maybe a state law, an AI announcement. But then you're also having to do a deeper dive into the compliance and think about what could the future regulations be? Is this appropriate for inbound? Is it appropriate for outbound? And then, as Chris mentioned, it's the hallucinations, right? That's the big scary point, right? We're still at a stage where AI is this ominous, scary thing. And, we've gotten chatbots and even ChatGPT to hallucinate. And, we've seen, I've got a teenager, and the #1 AI website for teenagers is a website called character.ai. And it's a unmitigated. You can chat with Harry Potter, Katniss Everdeen, Scooby-Doo, any kind of fictional character. And but one of the more common use cases of it in the last year is a chatbot persona called a psychiatrist bot. And it's not, or a psychologist bot. It's not a licensed therapist. It's just generating information out there. And they've had hallucinations and bad use cases where a teenager, killed himself last October because of Character.ai helping generate that outcome. And we've seen lawsuits against character AI because of those hallucinations. And so I think, certainly the industry, you're looking for how can we prevent against hallucinations? How can we prevent from these scary articles that about AI bots hallucinating come to the debt collection industry? And I think if we get it right, we can have nice things, but if we don't, I can think we can certainly expect to see a lot of state or federal regulations coming in, limiting or restricting the use of conversational AI and voice bots in the future.
I think that's a great lead in then to our next question. And Chris V, maybe I'll ask you to sort of lead here. What do you think makes AI particularly well suited to address compliance?
A couple factors. I think one is just the precision, right? Assuming your AI is well tuned and the accuracy is good, it's going to give you the same answer time and time again. It doesn't have human biases, right? So if we're thinking about QA staff and humans in general, there's a bias there on how we maybe view an interaction. You may view that as they executed the recording disclosure correctly, or someone else may say, no, they didn't because they missed one word. But, so human to human, scoring is very uneven, right? Because we're bringing our own perceptions there. Also, you can't have humans score everything. It's just not financially feasible at all to try to hire enough humans to QA 100% of all your collectors or agents, conversations. So you need something that scales and that is repeatable and can go back and say, I scored 200 calls, and on the RPC, I scored it the same way, 2-factor every single time, which was full name, and then 1 to 3, social security number, full address, or email address, something like that. And it's just repeatable, right? Because when we think about compliance, it's audit trails. It's, did you do this policy the same way every single time? And machines are great at that. Humans add in more variables due to the nature. So I think in general, AI is well suited for compliance just because it's very rigid. It needs to be the same standard every single time, and it needs to be very logical. We can go back and have that audit trail if needed.
Yeah. No, that's a great answer. Kyle or Heath, anything to add there?
I would also, I think Chris said it very, very well. Those two things are right on. I also think about this from a regulator's perspective, and ideally, regulators, they want this to be codified, and this allows us to codify AI. Compliance, exactly for the reasons that Chris just stated. The pattern recognition is better than any human being ever can be, and it can do it faster and a lot more. We can actually audit 100% of the interactions in real time. That was, by a long shot, never possible in the past. So I got to think that in today's day and age, this is going to be pretty cool from a regulator's perspective, that they can actually just say, here's the rule, and watch the ecosystem build it and adhere to it automatically in record time. The other thing that I think about for compliance, because it's such a complex thing to do, figure out and build, that's what the other big trend that we're seeing in AI is that instead of using it just to automate the simple and humanize the complex, we're actually switching that on its head in the last 6 to 12 months, saying we're going to use AI to automate the complex. So if you want to hire someone to go through a giant risk assessment and figure out where you have gaps and what the new policy should be and actually build those policies for the exact same reasons that Chris just stated, we can use AI to do that better than we as human beings can do.
Yeah, and I think for me, it all comes into, how implementation done well, right? It's not just AI that's suited well for compliance. It's humans and AI together that makes really effective compliance monitoring and programs, right? Because it's not just you're relying solely on the AI. You're going to have compliance humans working together as coworkers, where as Chris and Kyle mentioned, right? They're doing the mundane, the repetitive, the listening to 100% of all calls, and they're identifying exceptions that the humans are then listening to and doing the human review of the exceptions. And that cohesive unit together of humans and AI, that really expands and allows for way more oversight on way more aspects of your company than just traditional human alone or even AI alone. And so I think that's really the idea behind it is you're upskilling your humans. As you add AI tools to your company, you're also upskilling your employees to be able to launch the task, oversee those AI tasks, and then take the outputs of those AI tasks to be able to do other functions with it and use their critical thinking skills on, is this a violation? Is it not a violation? Is this an exception? What needs to be done in the next steps of that process? And the other thing I'd add too, from a regulatory standpoint, since Kyle mentioned it, is, at least the prior administration of the CFPB, they've been using AI to listen to calls for a couple of years now. And, when I talk to, clients or people in the industry, should we have speech analytics, or are we okay with just these regular samples of calls and not listening to 100% of our calls? What I say to them is, if you find yourself an examination or an audit of the CFPB, you don't want the first time that an organization listens to 100% of your calls to be a regulator. You want to be you first and be able to remediate and address any issues versus just handing those calls over and letting the CFPB do it for the first time.
Oh,
Great advice. Great
great
advice.
point. Yeah. Chris, you had a chat in there. Is this tech of from an application? It's a collection. Is it all sizes? Is there size limiters to a firm that may want to take advantage of any of this stuff?
Yeah, so someone texted in the question, which is why it didn't come in through the Q&A, but I'm wondering, just we've got a variety of attendees in terms of size. Is this, Chris, maybe this is a great question for you.
Mm-hmm.
At what level does an agency need to be for this to be applicable today?
Yeah, I think it depends, because I've had conversations with agencies that have as few as like 10 collectors, and I've talked to agencies that are upward of 400. What I would say is like typically a good number to where you start seeing the cost benefit analysis, because like there is cost with standing up a platform like ours or anyone else, is around like 20 collectors. Now, there are some instances in which I've spoken with agencies that have very, very large balances, like $5, $10, $50,000, and they only have 10 collectors. So at that point, the numbers can pencil, right? But I would say typically 20 and above, it will start making sense because you're at a scale and just kind of a size where the problem is enough to make that investment.
Yeah. All right. That's perfect. That's perfect.
The other thing I'd add to that, Chris, is that I think Chris hit the nail on the head for sure. 20 is a good number. The other thing you guys can start to think about is from your compliance team's perspective, what type of resourcing are you staffing compliance professionals at? There are different costs, obviously significantly than the actual agent. So replacing one compliance professional might very well be worth it, or not replacing, excuse me, assisting or supercharging one compliance professional quickly becomes well worth it.
Great point, and that leads into the next question, Chris Runcie.
Yeah, so I think we're going to ask Heath to lead on this one. Which compliance risks are most often overlooked when organizations adopt new channels or technologies like what we're discussing?
Sure. Yeah, I think the first thing I would say is tacking on a little bit of my last answer, and that is making sure you have employee buy-in, right? And what I mean by that is, for better or for worse, the last 200 years, anytime that we have a new technology, it's replacing human jobs. And so, you may be all excited about a new AI technology and you introduce it to your team, and your team may silently nod or but they're worried about their job, right? They're worried this is going to replace their job. And so what you need to do is for a successful implementation is make sure that the employees know that they are part of this solution. It is a human in the loop process of AI adoption, right? And we're not looking to replace anybody, especially with staffing shortages right now. They're only going to get worse. And the companies I see adopting AI are primarily doing it out of pain because they've got staffing issues, right? And so making sure that they are understood, they are trained to be upskilled with implementation, that's a huge key component to successful implementation of AI tools. As far as compliance risk, what I would say the overlooked aspect of it is data and the protection of consumer data, the protection of your confidential and proprietary data, and the protection of your client data. A lot of, if you go to any trade show nowadays, it's the expo hall is wall-to-wall AI this, AI that. And there's a lot of companies that have slapped on.
Affection,
What's that?
I say we say with affection to Mr. Sedric.
Yeah, yes, yeah, for sure. Well, it's not, but I mean, it really, you have no way of telling who the authentic AI, companies are from companies that are just slapping AI on their banner and then wrapping around ChatGPT or other AI services that don't protect your data. And so making sure you understand data map of if you're going to use an AI tool, where does your data go? Where does your data sit? Can it be used to train AI? And how can we protect that to be compliant with the Gramm-Leach-Bliley Act, with HIPAA, with any other state privacy laws about it? But I think the data protection is probably, from a compliance perspective, the biggest aspect of implementation.
Chris, I see you shaking your head. You want to jump in?
Yeah, I'll chime in just one moment on the data processing, because if you have a good point there, what I would say is, like, for us, we have a data processing addendum, and it tells you exactly how the data moves, who's touching it, and how we're protecting PCI, PII, etc. Right? So I think when you're engaging AI vendors, if they don't have that, that's a red flag to me, right? Because you should be able to tell anybody how does the data flow. And if you're saying, like, for us, like, we don't allow larger LLMs to be trained off of our data, it's contractual, we have audits, I can prove all that. So if they're not able to answer kind of those basics, then yeah, I'd definitely be concerned about, did they just get a open source of ChatGPT, slap a little wrapper on it and make a product? That's going to expose you for sure. But if they have policies like what we have and more, and they can show you those data diagrams and they contractually put that in there, that they're going to uphold to that, I think that's kind of the thresholds and the checks that you want to do to make sure that you are protecting yourself and that the vendor is holding true to what they're saying.
Great points. Great points.
Quick things I'd add to that, Chris, that I just came across that I thought was interesting to share. Maybe not as relative to collections, because you're probably not using WhatsApp as often in collections, but some of the new technology that is going to be leveraged out there, it's not built for auditability. Like, you can auto delete things and it's gone. You can never go back and see what message was captured. Like WhatsApp and Slack, use Slack for inter-channel or inter-company messaging, and if you use that to execute your SOPs, and then you need to go back and through and say, how did we make the decisions? Well, those Slacks can be deleted permanently, and you can never get back to them. So there's some really weird and nuanced things that we weren't expecting to have to cover that we have to cover. The second one I wanted to share with the group is, I think Chris and Heath did a really good job talking about bias and hallucinations. One thing that I always forget is the fact that these tools will often, AI especially, will bias toward the good. They're going to try to give the best answer that the end user wants to hear. And sometimes that's not really a good thing. Sometimes they're inadvertently breaking the laws with the intention of saying a positive message, like, oh, it's okay that you don't pay this bill. Well, it didn't mean that it's okay that you never pay this bill. But does a lawyer take that and say, well, AI said this, that means they never have to pay that bill? So there's really weird things going on in the industry right now too.
Interesting. Heath, I know we already touched a little bit on evolving regulatory changes. I guess I don't want to dig too deep into this question, but I feel like we covered a bit of it. But anything to sort of add in terms of what you see coming?
Yeah, certainly we know it's in the crosshairs of federal, state regulators. I think, prior to the transition to the Trump administration, we know that the CFPB was right up to the edge of, looking at conversational AI that collectors were using. I haven't heard of any exams that have happened since the Trump administration, so that could be on hold for a couple of years. Maybe they've come out with some executive orders on AI, but largely at a federal level, it appears that the Trump administration is looking to not overly regulate AI and not stifle its development. That being said, the cliche is that when the CFPB steps away, the states step in, and we have seen states staff up and position for audits and examinations. I haven't heard anything coming out on AI just yet, but I go back to my earlier point that really, what we want to make sure is that AI is done well, and it's not hurting the consumer. It's a consumer benefit. From a compliance perspective, they're getting more accurate statements on the calls. From a multi-channel or omni-channel basis, they can, transfer a phone call with an AI to a text message to an email and have a seamless experience without having to regurgitate and retell their story, 10-minute long story to a new agent if they get disconnected on the phone. So there are real benefits. And the one thing I'll call to is, last year, so the FCC's ruling on TCPA applying to outbound calls, that happened in record time. That actually happened in a 30-day window before that final rule came out last February. And what happened was, I know it's a decade ago, but last year we actually did have a presidential election. It was just a year ago. And in January, there was a Democratic primary challenger to Joe Biden. And what this individual did is he paid someone $150 to make an AI call of Joe Biden's voice to call voters in New Hampshire, telling them not to show up to vote. And, that happened January 15th. By February 8th, the FCC had a final rule making and declaring that outbound AI calls were governed under the TCPA. If you know anything about regulation, that is a record time for federal government to move and make a final order. Again, they took a bad use case that they thought was bad and unfair, and they acted and adopted. So what we want to prevent in our industry as far as regulatory trends is, bad outcomes of, consumers being harmed, consumers being threatened, consumers that are being confessed or loved by AI, all these hallucinations scenarios we're talking about that would justify regulators from coming in and passing regulations that limit and restrict the use of AI technology.
Great point. Great example too.
We'll move on to the next set of questions, Chris, but I want to pick up the pace or be mindful of our clock.
Yeah. So let's just see here. Maybe we might abbreviate a couple of these. I think Chris V, you're up next. This is still very relevant, I think, to our audience. So how does AI improve compliance detection in real time compared to traditional post-call reviews?
Yeah, so what's really nice is actually one of our products squarely focus on this, which is the real-time agent assist, and that is a tool that sits side by side with the collector, tapping into the telephony in real time and being able to show what's happening in the conversation. Ours is done in such a way where we can actually highlight the critical compliance pieces missed within a phone call. Right, so we think of the recording disclosure, the RPC, and the mini Miranda are typical. You miss that, your client's going to tell you the whole scorecard's failed. So we call that a critical fail. Real time with AI is able to detect that, and we can even notify a manager to then correct that mistake before the call terminates, thus resulting in that compliance violation, right? Or depending on how you run your RPC too, right? We want to make sure we go back and do this properly. So I think AI is uniquely positioned to kind of always be that co-pilot and that helper to be able to inform the collector when they maybe miss something and or be able to reach out on the collector's behalf and get them the necessary help or resources if they're maybe just too overwhelmed because it's a very maybe like a stressful call or they're newer, right? So that's how we see it helping a lot in real time, because obviously if I can correct that before the call terminates, then I have the ability to right that wrong. But once the call is done and ended, at that point, we can only kind of remediate after the fact.
Yeah, it's a great point. Great point. Heath or Kyle, anything to add there?
I think he described it well. I mean, I think that's the goal, right? To have, just as we use AI technology, ChatGPT, to be kind of our co-pilot, our assistant to help us be more efficient, having that co-pilot on an agent phone call real time, not just for compliance, but to provide assistance, recommended language to say, or to de-escalate a call. There's all kinds of use cases when you kind of really lean into, again, using that technology to equip your humans to have better and more successful calls.
I think the other thing I'm excited about the real-time 100% monitoring is the fact that we have so much more opportunity to remediate same day. That's the big thing. We can go right back to him and say, let me fix this issue that happened at 11 o'clock this morning in the same calendar, which is huge for payments and disputes and complaints and all of those things.
Yeah, no, that's great. That's great. Chris, I think Murph, we can jump to the next slide. I want to bounce to these final three questions because I think they're gonna take some time to get through. Chris V, we'll start again with you. How can automation help organizations expand compliance coverage without increasing monitoring costs?
Yeah, I think Kyle said it well. When we think about AI, think of it as like a catalyst or supercharging, your team, whether that's operations or compliance, right? If we think about it, let's say you have an agency with 50 agents, compliance team's probably two people. They're not going to be able to cover all that. But with AI, they're able to see 100% of all those interactions, and then what I call is get an exception-based report. So instead of them trying to find a needle in the haystack and find a call that may have a violation, they're instead logging into something like Sedric and getting that report and saying, okay, here's all your disputes, here's all your DNCs, your bankruptcies, and all your failed scorecards. So they can go through those remediation processes, reporting, notification of customer, follow up with the client, etc., and make sure that everything's well documented, right? So that's how you're able to kind of expand that. And again, like now let's look at that 50 agency, because they're doing so well and they're winning more RFPs, they're taking on more business, which would typically mean I need to staff more collectors in QA. But if you're leveraging AI well, you actually get that nice kind of multiplier where you don't need to add more headcount because you're able to do more with less, which is what everyone's looking for because we have really hard staffing shortages and those aren't going away anytime soon. So I think it's a huge spot there of looking at how to best leverage AI to be that catalyst and really be that multiplier and enhance what you're doing so that your employees are able to focus on driving business value versus doing the busy work to get to the business value.
I think that's well said. Let's go to the next question. I think we're going to ask each of you to take a stab at this. Heath, I'm going to ask you to lead. What do you see as the next major compliance challenge in multi-channel communications?
Yeah, good question. I think, obviously we've talked about hallucinations. That's going to be the either if it's regulated or not regulated, hallucinations are going to be the big one, especially as we get more and more conversation and voice with it. The one thing that we haven't talked about yet is that, AI is not in a vacuum. AI adoption is not in a vacuum. So just as we are adopting AI technology and tools, so too will consumers.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I think we are only probably months away from, the iPhone, the Android, from being able to, activate Google Gemini, Apple Intelligence, for a consumer to say, hey, Siri, hey, Gemini, call this debt collector and negotiate my debt. I want to pay $1,000 only, and launch that phone call and then walk away. And now your human agents or your AI agents are now talking to a consumer-generated AI. And we've already had the calls coming from debt settlement companies. But what we're seeing in that is we're seeing an increased talk time that's taking up time on the phones. And it's how do we prepare for and adopt, and how do we verify that the consumer has authorized that call and it's not a spam call, that someone read someone's mail and called in and made a baiting or a spam call from it. So I think when we look at outside of our own internal vacuum and look at how the consumers are going to use it, that's where we're going to see challenges in that interactions. And the ideal scenario is the Nash equilibrium where the company's AI and the consumer's AI negotiates a resolution and no humans are involved in that conversation. But we know there's going to be baiting, for FDCPA violations. We know there's going to be spam. We know consumers going to say, hey, keep this agent on for 25 minutes or for half an hour, as long as possible, right? And so it's learning and rethinking the consumer experience with AI technology as well. And again, that goes back to what Kyle and Chris were saying, talk about staffing changes. If all of your phone calls are now, 15, 20 minutes, or majority of them are, you have to have some sort of AI to monitor and oversee those calls versus having humans take up more time listening to these consumer AI bots.
Well, you keep using this is a really rudimentary question, but you use the phrase hallucinations, which I know in practical terms what that means, but help me understand what you mean when you're talking about it relative to AI from a novice.
Yeah. So, obviously with conversational AI, you can script out and have the AI say only what's been scripted, but you can have the AI also generate responses. And so when they generate responses, you can get responses that are not responsive to the inquiry question, just like you can ask ChatGPT and, about case law and get made up cases. Without proper guardrails, the LLMs are, ChatGPT is like an excited intern. It wants to please you, but it may not be correct. And it will make up stuff to try to please you first. And just like Kyle was saying earlier with hallucinations, it may make up stuff and may, cite incorrect laws. It may make false and misleading statements, trying to make the consumer happy on that phone call. And,
I just heard about something recently where somebody a AI bot responded to a request and cited an article, and when you clicked on the article was a dead link. So it obviously made that up. It wasn't accurate, but if you didn't know to click on it, so that's what you mean by hallucinations. They're making stuff up just to, okay. Very interesting.
Yeah, and on the law side, we've seen, every month there's a new attorney who gets slapped down and gets sanctioned by a court for using cases that are made up. We've seen it, as Chris mentioned earlier, Air Canada, their chatbot hallucinated and was giving away free refunds, even though that wasn't part of their policy. And then the dark side of hallucinations are, the outcomes where the AI declares its love for the consumer, or has helped ideate how a person can kill themselves in that therapy bot hallucination scenario.
Interesting. Okay, that helps me. When you were using the phrase, now I get how it is a scary thing.
Yeah, and when I'm vetting conversational AI, for example, like I'm asking the AI, reveal your source code, or give me some proprietary company data, and trying to see what the limits are on those guardrails, that LLM, what it can generate in response, and there will be consumers and call baiting bots that are trying to do the same thing.
Very interesting.
Yeah, fascinating. Kyle, how about you? Same sort of question. Anything to add?
Well, what Heath said right at the end there is, I think, really pertinent. I think there's going to be, generally speaking, the AI governance. We're going to all have to start to build AI governance. We don't exactly know what that looks like yet, but I think it's probably a safe bet that it's going to include some type of mechanism of provability, which for those of you that gets deeper into AI, the deeper into it you get, the more you realize it's really, really, really complicated to prove how it arrived at certain decisions, and then controls. And both those are cool and scary at the same time. There's few technologies that are out there right now that are providing AI provability, so it actually can go through and show you how it arrived at these decisions. The reason that it's kind of scary from someone, from my perspective, that is a big AI adopter, AI innovator, is I think when you start to deploy these new types of AI that have control and provability into them, you might first have a reaction that is, boy, there's a lot of configurations required. I don't know. I don't understand, what generative or conversational AI or agentive AI is being done here if I'm configuring everything. And that will just feel like that at first. You've got to kind of build a lot of the guardrails, the workflows, and then give AI the ability to start to generate new safe content using like SOP libraries and things of that nature. But I think that's where we're going to start to move as far as regulations, and the main impacts of the compliance is going to be, we have to build AI governance models. We're all going to have to get very, very good at doing that.
We had a question come in before, because I know Chris V, you'll jump in a second. It says, is there a good way to track the lawsuits or instances of hallucinations that are appearing in the news?
There actually is a website that tracks the hallucinations from lawyer submissions and court briefs and sanctions. But yeah, as far as, lawsuits from wrong information, I'm not aware of any tracker for that. But I know in the legal setting, there's a website that tracks, the different times that lawyers are using AI incorrectly and being sanctioned by the court.
Yeah, my best answer is Google Alert. Just create a Google Alert and take it and feed it through. I know the irony, feed it through ChatGPT or Grok, whatever it is that you're used to using if you don't want to read it all. But Google Alert's the only way I know to track that holistically across the internet.
Yep, exactly what I was going to say, Chris. I use different chatbots for different things. I use DeepSeek to do those type of things.
Yep.
All right, the last pre-prepared question we have, Chris V, I'm going to ask you to lead on this one. What advice would you give to all the organizations that are on the call with us today who are just starting their journey into AI-powered compliance?
Yeah, I think the easiest way to start is like post-call AI analysis, right? I know everyone loves starting with real time because it's, the sexy thing, and believe me, I love it too, but it's a lot more work, right? Just bluntly speaking, from a workload perspective, a technical integration perspective, do you have all the data structured properly? Is your CRM set up, et cetera? So I'd say post call is going to be the easiest, being able to analyze 100% of your agent's conversations, voice, email, text, web chat, whatever it may be, and score them against your scorecard. Because what I've realized, part of our process is we review every client's scorecard, and we give some recommendations on how to clean up the scorecard, optimize it. And what's been interesting is a lot of people have questions in their scorecards that aren't relevant or actually are confusing, and they weren't aligned internally. So part of it, even before you get started, is just like helping you kind of clean up your own maybe QA, QC processes and really challenge yourself of, do we need these questions, or what are we trying to identify, correct, or prevent? And I think that's going to be a great way to really get started. And once you start seeing, okay, I have a lot more data now, right? Because this is going to generate a plethora more data. I can start seeing trends, and I can start doing further root cause analysis, or maybe even that will open up other projects to where I can see maybe we're having more challenges with like letters, right? We're getting people calling in because they don't understand the letters. Now I've analyzed 100% of my conversations. I'm understanding that. Is there something else I can do to maybe automate that process? So I think post-call QA is a great start. It gives you the data. It's not customer facing, so you don't have to be so concerned, around that kind of piece. And it's a way that can, I think, really open up more options for solving other issues that you maybe weren't aware were actually ongoing because you just lacked enough data to be able to make those trends.
That's great. That's great. Heath, same question to you.
Yeah, I think Chris laid out, obviously compliance is a great place to start with a journey. Compliance tools, compliance use cases. When I look at AI technology, again, it's not just the internal, it's the consumer, and how is it going to be regulated in the future. And the idea is you want to find tools and use cases of AI that won't be deemed illegal in 2 years, and whatever you've invested in it, it'll, you kind of throw it in the trash, right? And compliance is a great way to do it. I think, Kyle mentioned earlier in terms of governance from a compliance perspective, having an AI policy, having an AI committee, and having an AI risk assessment, and then having training done for employees that are authorized to use AI tools within your company. Those are kind of the 4 pillars of what an AI compliance program would look like. And so, with that, you can have discussions, and part of that committee is, we're not doing that top down where ownership is all in and the employees aren't. You're going to find different level of employees to be a part of that committee to say, hey, especially younger employees who are using this technology in their everyday personal lives, they can bring the ideas of, hey, at home, I use this AI tool to do my taxes or pay my bills, and this can be a great help if we brought it into the workplace. So you're getting that buy-in from a middle up and middle down level versus just kind of a top down implementation of it.
Great advice. Kyle?
Yeah, I'll give you two specific things, and I agree with Chris and Heath. They're awesome recommendations. First, partner with somebody. Find somebody to partner with. There are tons of great products and companies out there. I would definitely encourage you to find someone that is really good at taking an SME or and partnering a human in the loop that partners with the automation. That's my biggest recommendation for a partner. The second thing, and really, really more specific, go hire somebody that is, and I don't mean to be biased, relatively young, that's hungry and interested in learning and doing all these things. Bring them in and pick something. I would pick training. Heath mentioned, because the AI that's proven itself very, very good is that builds content. ChatGPT, it reads SOPs and it builds content. And if you think about what training does in this digital space, we're no longer having a human being walk in front of somebody else and show them how to do it. We're providing written content, digital content. We're delivering it digitally. We're monitoring it digitally. It's being executed delivery digitally. AI can do all of that. And I share this like this because I run across so many young people that are just creating things from scratch that somebody else said it was impossible yesterday. There's a company that we're engaged with at the moment that I'm negotiating with, that the individual said something so interesting, which was, I've got these engineers that I'm using to build these automations, and I'm realizing that I'm more successful grabbing the person that's 25 or younger that spent the last 2 months becoming an expert at the current state AI because they have no bias. They have no restrictions. They think anything is possible. I would start to bring that into my organization because AI needs to be part of your culture. Everybody has to learn it. Everybody has to be good at it. I would do it with training. Bring in somebody to start that process. And Heath's point, they'll be part of the governance. They'll be right in the middle of the governance team.
That's great. That's great. I think that's terrific feedback. Those are going to be our sound bites for this webinar tomorrow when we repost on LinkedIn. All right, that's great. I guess we'll pause for a moment. We've got a couple of minutes left. I want to be mindful of time. It's amazing how quickly an hour goes by. We'll invite the audience to submit any questions through the Q&A link.
Yeah, and while they're doing that, I just want to go back. This, for me, this has been incredibly cool, just listening to subject matter experts like the three of you really talk about this, which really, more importantly, accentuates why we're doing this in a multi-webinar process. So knowing that, hey, we just covered a small piece of one today, and it was thick, but upcoming for those of you that are on, and we'll post this out there, but the upcoming series where we're going to dive deep into each one of these topics, just keep that in mind. We're excited about that.
And Chris V, you get all the credit there. This was your idea when we met and spoke earlier this year in February. So we thank you again for graciously sponsoring the webinar today, and we want to thank all of our panelists for taking time to talk with us today. Again, to everybody that's on the call and to those who aren't but maybe watching this, we will be distributing a link to this recording, a link to the presentation deck, and contact information for each of our panelists today. So thank you, Kyle. Thank you, Heath. And Chris V, thank you. And we'll look forward to seeing you again on September 3rd for the next webinar with Sedric.
Awesome.
I would say also, if you have not seen a demo of what this can do, when Chris V from Sedric, they had a chance to demo some of what he described today when I watched it. Now, I'm an old guy, so when Heath and Kyle were talking about bringing in a young guy, I took no exception to that, but I'm an old guy. But when I saw what his tool did,
Amazing.
It blew my mind. And I just immediately went to all the firms that I have been with over the number of years and how we struggled to do certain things we did and how he solved these problems in such an amazing way. So that was very cool. So I would encourage anybody to, if you haven't seen a demo of how this stuff can be used, it's really, really cool.
Chris V, we'll give you the mic for the last minute here. Anything else that you want to say about your product to our audience here?
Yeah, like what I want to say is just in general, like I'm happy to be a resource if it's not even just about Sedric, because I really value the community and giving back. So first and foremost, if someone just wants to have a conversation about AI, how to get started, I know the ecosystem. It's what I live and breathe in. Secondly, about Sedric, obviously we're focused on compliance and operations, right? Whether it's real time and multiplying those agents, or it's post call, we're looking for the coaching, we're looking for the QA remediation because clients are requesting AI now in the RFPs. There's a lot of ways that this can become a competitive edge, right? And you can really learn and shorten those learning cycles, right? It's not only the AI models are getting smarter, it's that people that are using them are also shortening those learning curves internally and unlocking more value. So happy to be a resource anyway and talk through those unique use cases and be able to just get people started on the journey. I know it can be scary at first, but please leverage me as you see fit, because once I see companies adopt it, what can be unlocked and how that helps them win more business and stay more competitive. It's just amazing to see that change.
Terrific.
Great. DebtLink's going to be at DCF coming up in October down in New Orleans, so we're excited about that. Looking at the Fall Forum also in November, so keep an eye out for us there. And Chris, I'll let you wrap us up. Runcie?
Yeah, thank you again, Chris V, Sedric, Heath, and Kyle for your time today. We really appreciate it. I think it was a terrific discussion, and I hope we can pick it up again sometime soon.
Definitely. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.